introductions. And why don't I go first? Brian O with Permit Sonoma. Turn it over to Carrie.
Carrie Svanstrom, a planning director for City of Sebastopol. Go to Chris Barney.
Chris Barney with SCTA. We'll go ahead and pass it to Janet Spillman.
Janet Spillman, SCTA. And to Drew.
Drew Nichols, SCTA. And then Ada's on my right.
Hi, Ada Chan, ABEG MTC. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Betts. I started as principal planner with SMART in April. This is my first time at this meeting. I'm passing to Dana.
Hi, Dana Trey with SCTA. And sorry, I got a few minutes late. I'm not sure who went last, but I will pick Kevin.
Hi, Kevin Thompson with the City of Cloverdale. Again, I came out a little late too, so I'll pass it to one of the two Kims.
I'm Kim Jordan with the Town of Windsor. And I'll pass it to the other Kim.
Good morning, I'm Kim Vogue with the Town of Windsor. Oh, and I will pass it to Orlando.
Well, I'll go since I'm also with Windsor and I haven't gone yet. Jessica Jones, Community Development Director, Town of Windsor. And I'll go ahead and pass it to Orlando.
Hi, this is Orlando with Caltrans District 4, and I will pass it to Raphael.
Hi, good morning. Raphael Miranda, Associate Planner at the City of Cloverdale. I'll pass it to Noah.
Good morning, Noah House, Community Development Director, City of Cotati, and I'll pass it to JP.
Morning, JP with the City of Cotati, and I will pass it to, let me look here, Scott.
This is Scott Ivan with the City of Healdsburg, and I spoke over the other Scott, so I will pass it to him.
Thank you, Scott. I'm Scott Orr. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning at Permit Sonoma, County of Sonoma. And I will pass it to Jeffrey. I got on late, so I don't know if Jeffrey went.
I have not, and I got on late too, so I'll have to guess as well. This is Jeff Beiswinger from City of Rohnert Park, and I'll just pass it to whoever hasn't spoken yet.
I believe we rounded out the committee there. Well, thanks for trying that in the spirit of the first week of back to school there. I thought we'd do a little popcorn style there. All right. Well, why don't I turn it over? Let's see, we have item number 2, some administrative items to cover. So I'll turn that over to Janet.
Okay, so hopefully y'all have the agenda somewhere in front of you. We always look for any changes, additions that you'd like to make. And pending that, approval of the agenda.
Hey, Janet.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it'd be possible to move the member updates further back. It just seems like sometimes we don't get to some of the business that's on hand. As much as I do value those, it's just I'd also like to get to kind of the content of the meeting as well. So it doesn't look like it's as heavy a schedule today, but I just like to be there. And I just point out that I need to leave at 10:30 for another staff meeting. So it's always helpful to have that, the meat of the meeting up front. Thanks.
I would concur with that, and I have to jump off at 10 o'clock. So
does the chair okay these changes, additions?
Yeah, I think that's great.
All right, good. Meeting notes, June 17th. Any questions, comments, corrections? Okay, we'll assume they're great, as they usually are. And I think that's it for me then.
Okay, well, so what I heard was we'll move 5A back. So why don't we just move down to item number 3, VMT Calculator assessment of need and potential options. And I believe Chris Barney is going to cover this.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and good morning, everyone. This is something we've kind of touched on in the past as part of SB 743 implementation. And, the idea is really to discuss not only a VMT calculator, but talking about mitigation and VMT reduction as well in the same context. So I know early on, I'd introduced a few different types of tools that are out there in development and that are being used. There are, two main types of tools that are being used in practice right now across the state. They're spreadsheet type tools, which are mostly based off a tool that was developed down in San Diego by SANDAG. That lets you look at different project locations and effectiveness of VMT mitigation. And then VTA down in Santa Clara County was able to develop a web-based application that project sponsors and staff can go in and use to calculate or estimate VMT for different projects and also the effectiveness of VMT mitigation. So, here to frame the discussion, the idea is to discuss developing a tool for Sonoma County that project sponsors and staff could use to do three main things. The first thing is to estimate project VMT based on the project type, whether or not it's a residential project, office project, or other type of project, pull in information from the travel model, and provide a quick VMT estimate in the tool. So right now, this is something we can do in the travel model and, using other data sources to do this. Some of you may have already been working on this. I know the county's been developing some tools to use as well. So that's kind of the first step is estimating, what's the VMT impact of this project. The second part is identifying any screening. And so the state guidance includes some information on when you can screen out the projects, when VMT analysis actually should take place. So, the tool could look at project size, proximity to transit, and also map-based screening using information from the travel model to really locate those low VMT areas. And then finally, probably the most compelling part of the tool would be identifying and calculating effective VMT mitigation measures and including all of those formulas in the tool. So you could enter in the project, get a VMT estimate, check for pre-screening really quickly. And then, if it is found that mitigation is required, you could click through a number of different options to determine the effectiveness of those VMT mitigations. So I've identified kind of three different options. If this is a priority or if this would be useful for you all in making this happen. I took this to the TAC, the Public Works folks last month, and there was general interest in doing something, but they recommended bringing it to the planners for discussion. So the three different options that I've kind of outlined in the staff report are number one, just having me at SCTA do it. We do have resource issues at SCTA, so we wouldn't be able to commit to any time frame. So it would probably take quite a long time to actually work through this. And it would be basically an off the shelf adaptation of the SANDAG tool. So no customization, taking all the formulas and mitigations included in that tool. And yeah, no time frame on that. The second option would be getting some consultant support to adapt the SANDAG tool. The main issue with that is we'd need some local support from the local jurisdictions on that consultant contract. SCTA could manage the consultant and do the project management, but we would need some additional contributions. The benefit there is we'd have a quicker turnaround. Hopefully getting something in place sometime in 2022. We'd be able to request some customization for Sonoma County, include some additional mitigations that may be more appropriate for our county. And then we'd have some consultant expertise there to, get questions answered. And this is the approach that some of our neighbors have taken. Napa County's doing this, Alameda and Contra Costa are all working with consultants to develop this type of tool, the spreadsheet type tool. And then finally, the final option is to look at something like what Santa Clara County did in developing a web-based tool. So this is the most expensive type of implementation. We definitely need financial support to do that. But there are some usability benefits to that web-based tool. It's easily accessible. It's like any other web-based application you may be used to using. You can click on a parcel, type in number of units or square footage of the project, and it'll kind of walk you through the process. So the usability is pretty high there. It would take longer. It's very expensive, and it's kind of a ways out. So I just wanted to get feedback from the group on, number one, if there's still interest in this sort of tool, and if there's any preference on, any of these three options, and then, think about if your jurisdiction would be able to help fund this as well. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Brian and the group.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
I know there was some, before we go around and provide some thoughts, I know that there was another effort somewhat tied to this at the regional level. Ada, would you be able to just provide a little bit of an update on?
Yeah, and while you were talking, I was like, oh, is there any way we could contribute funding? And then I kind of thought, at the rate we move, I just need to stop talking. So I apologize. I just need to be honest about that. Right, Chris, we've been talking about the VMT work from the regional part for like a year now. The funding's been approved. We finally got an RFP out. It closes today. But when we started the conversation a year ago, it was about helping local jurisdictions get their VMT policies implemented. And some of you still need that support, but there's a phase 2 to it that might help Chris in terms of it's a little bit more open, and I really fought to help to get the hotel kind of thinking, the industrial vineyard and agriculture. It's open and it hasn't been defined, but I kind of fought to keep it open. So so we could help develop some of that backstop thinking for the region, and it wouldn't have to be done locally. It reduces the risk, right? But so Chris is more familiar about the subject matter and how he might be able to take advantage of it as part of your effort. And just with the new funding that's becoming available, I guess, even though it's a bit out, are there opportunities for us to, I know that MTC had a pretty strong line in this first round of funding to say we weren't doing calculators. So I was really just struggling, like, what are the backup things that we could help with, right?
Yeah, Ada, one thing that I would say is maybe if there's a little room in that to help identify some local mitigations that we could include in a tool, I think that would be very helpful, providing at least some consultant support and expertise on that.
I would just like to point out that Chris has covered all options here, including doing it on his own staff time, but number one isn't really a realistic option for us. So I don't see SCTA really being able to do this with our existing resources in a very reasonable time frame.
Do you have any idea how much it would cost each city, or would it be broken down by population or some kind of formula?
Yeah, what we've done in the past is broken it down by population, similar to the contributions that you're already making to SCTA. So that's definitely something that we can put together. And there's been talk here of spreading it over a couple fiscal years as well. So if there's interest, I can go back and put together a funding proposal looking at that.
Yeah, this is Noah. Chris, I really appreciate it, and Janet, I totally understand. Like, you know, I get it. So I mean, thank you guys for even kind of talking about managing it, because it would be very helpful. What would be helpful to me to know is kind of the timelines in the difference between the spreadsheet versus the web-based tool, the cost differences, right? To just make a more informed decision. And then where ABAG MTC funding might be able to kind of plug in on either one of those or both. And then lastly, I was just thinking, you know, there are a few regional traffic impact fee pots of money out there. Is that something that could be tapped into? And then lastly, I think at a minimum, we could come up with some contribution to the overall. Obviously, you know, it's a benefit to us, and so we could definitely chip in. The number, you know, I'd have to talk to the powers that be, but
Yeah, I have a quick answer for the cost. So I've been able to talk to our neighbors and how much it's costed to develop these in their jurisdictions. And so for the spreadsheet based SANDAG implementation, we'd be looking about $75,000, and then for a web-based application, $400,000. So certainly a wide gap there. But yeah, I can provide a better timeline as well. There are a few dates in the staff report, but I think those would need to be pushed out at this point.
Like Carrie has her hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I agree with Noah. This would be extremely helpful. I do have a question for Ada. Is when you say ABAG is, I know they're working on the VMT policy, will that include some assistance with setting VMT levels for a jurisdiction?
Yes, so it'll be very specific to, but it's specific to jurisdictions and working. Kind of, it'll take a group of you through kind of that conversation and understanding how to do it for yourselves, each of you. So I think, I don't know, Chris.
And so here's, you know, how you ABAG, and if there is a way that ABAG and SCTA can, you know, make sure there's not duplication, but it sounds like this would be really helpful on the mitigation side, Chris. Yeah. And I do have, and one of the reasons I'm asking it is I actually put in for my SB2 and LEAP funds VMT work, because as I just saw in the top chat, someone else connected to pro housing and the ability to streamline housing. So I'm assuming I'd be able to contribute those SB2 funds to SCTA to, you know, basically as a consultant or contractor to do the work. So from the city of Sebastopol, we will have some funding to contribute to the project.
Chris, I wonder, just as you get some of the follow-up information, if it might make sense, unless you're already tracking this, just how each of the jurisdictions and where they're at in development. And I think that might even point to even like a subgroup of us that may be interested in the coming ABAG sort of working group cohort. But that might be helpful just to see, like, you know, these jurisdictions already have the funding to work on, and they have ongoing work. They already have policies. I'm sure there's a quick little chart that could be helpful. And then I'm sure each respective jurisdiction would then want to prioritize. But, you know, this sounds like a really critical component that we should be collaborating on. Like Amy has her hand up.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm excited about the mitigation work that could potentially be coming out of ABAG, but also the calculator, mainly because I think we need some cross-jurisdictional mitigation ideas. So I know there's still policy needs and mitigation concept needs, but that's the encouraging thing. And I think that's really an awesome thing for a collaborative to do, or collaborative work, I should say. But also I was curious, Chris, if we go with the more inexpensive spreadsheet route, could we eventually scale up to a web-based? So I saw Ada's note about REAP 2.0, which is great because I didn't even realize there was a REAP 2.0 in the works. But if that were to be an eventual opportunity, we can start with a spreadsheet and then eventually do web-based, and if that's workable.
Yeah, I think that'd actually be a really smart way to go. We could work out all the mitigations and the formulas and everything in the spreadsheet-based approach, and that could all be ported over into some web-based application. Yeah, if all the, the skeletons there, that it's all web development, right? At that point. So yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion of a possible way forward.
All right, is there any other comments from the jurisdiction? I see there's a hand up from Scott.
Yeah, just to piggyback on the last comment, I think the most important thing is having something functional and usable as a priority. I mean, waiting essentially an extra year for web development versus having a tool we could potentially use in 2022. I mean, for me, being able to be dangerous now is much more valuable than, the pretty version. So it's the only comment I have.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was wondering, does this have any, well, I'm sure it does, but how would this work in concert with RCPA's VMT mitigation bank? Is there a tie in there? Or?
We certainly could, that could be on the list of mitigations, certainly. That's something we need to investigate further and evaluate the effectiveness for. But, I think that could certainly show up on that list of mitigations.
Okay, so that's the link. I got it.
How about the other Scott?
Yeah, I just wanted to express that Healdsburg is interested in participating in any way. We're kind of at ground zero on this, just given staffing levels and all of that. So I've already reached out to Ada about being part of that collaborative that they're putting together, and certainly interested in exploring anything that SCTA is up to. So just wanted to throw us behind it. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Jessica?
Yeah, so I just say I'm from Windsor. I agree with everything that has been said today. I think, this looks like some great options. I like the idea of starting with kind of option 2 and then perhaps using some funds from MTC ABAG for, going a web-based route. We are currently in the process of creating our VMT policies and thresholds. So we'll want to take a look and see how this kind of integrates with that, but Windsor is also interested.
Thanks, Jessica. Looks like Ada, you went off camera, but your hand's up.
So just wanted to share the timeline for the VMT work that we're doing. We're expecting to start in January or December, January. So we've got the RFP, it closes today. Just so folks know when that will start getting going.
Thank you. All right, any final thoughts from members of the committee before I turn it over to the public? It looks like there's a question from the public. All right, Steve, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, this is a wonderful discussion. We are, from the Transportation Land Use Coalition perspective, looking at the need for a 5% per year reduction in VMT to reach the 2030 carbon neutral goal. And I'm just curious how that fits in. Is that just a mitigation issue?
Well, Steve, this is primarily looking at individual projects. So it's not tied specifically to any regional or statewide target. It would be looking at, the local thresholds, and maybe one jurisdiction, I'm guessing most jurisdictions will be pretty in line with the state guidance and, looking at trying to get projects down to 15% below the average VMT generation for a project. And so, that's kind of the closest link right there is, trying to get projects in low VMT areas, or if they're generating higher than that amount of VMT, figuring out, how that can be mitigated. So, there's a link there, but it's not directly tied to that, 5 VMT per year reduction that you have mentioned. But,
Okay.
there's certainly, I think it would be useful to look at this in that context as well.
Good. Thank you.
So Brian, just as a follow-up, I have a few things I'll make sure that I do. I'll put together a funding plan that looks at how the cost could be split, along with tightening up the schedule. And then as far as evaluating where everyone's at for SB 743, I can put together a Google form and send it out to the group and, make it really simple, like 7 or 8 questions, probably even less, of where you're at, what would be helpful, and, just send that out to the group. And if you could fill that out, I can compile it into a table and get that out to everyone as well, if you think that would be useful.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right.
I'll get going on that stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. And are you staff on the CTP update, or is that for Janet on item number 4?
That'll be Janet.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Well, so
right.
let's move on to CTP with Janet.
Okay. So I made the presentation to our board of directors on July 12th with the draft CTP. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to look at it. We had a lot of questions from our board members about our commitment to zero emissions, which is one of our 4 goals, and strategies for moving forward on that goal. So we're doing a lot of work to make clear what SCTA is able to do with the resources and tools that we have at our disposal now to accomplish our goals, including zero emissions by 2050. If you looked at the plan, we addressed it in several different places. We're trying to make it more clear exactly how we can move forward and how the cities play a fairly robust role in that, as our project list is all from the cities and the county. And it's our primary tool of assessment of the plan as a whole toward our goals. So when we measure whether or not we can reach a goal, we're doing that based on the projects that we've received from all of you. I just thought I'd point that out because we will be drawing attention to that fact in our presentation on September 13th, where we will go back to our board with the final CTP and ask for approval of the document. Does anybody have any questions about CTP or how we're moving forward with this? Okay. I guess that can, yes?
Janice, no, sorry, can you just elaborate on what you anticipate would happen at the September meeting?
My guess as to how our board will react to our report.
And also what's needed from cities ahead of that, because you have the, the call for projects out right now. So just how those 2 things come together.
Yeah, absolutely. So the projects that I'm referring to have been on our list and on our website since 2019. We did a call for projects then. The call for projects that's out right now is for actual programming. And they should be related very strongly. I haven't had a chance to see, well, I don't know if we're requiring that they be from our project list. I should go back and look at the guidance on the project list, on the call for projects. But that's the hope that, we produce a list of projects from all of you that you find necessary for the next 30 years. And that as time goes on and that project list is updated every 5 years or so, that's how we draw for programming, what your priorities are. hopefully come from that list of projects. That's the idea. So the list of transportation projects is available online. We have 232 projects. Many of them are small, relatively small roadway improvements. We have a lot of bike projects, and we have a lot of transit projects, or rather, we have a handful of transit projects that are very expensive because they include a lot of expansion of service, which is a big ticket item. I encourage you to look at the project list. But what we've noted over the years is that these kinds of projects, minus the bike and transit projects, your road improvement projects, will not move the needle on GHG reductions very much, even in aggregate. So that is kind of a hard fact that we are trying to grapple with and inform our board of, that we have a list of projects that are necessary to our communities, are important to neighborhoods, that don't really connect very well with GHG emission reduction goals. I think I answered your question. Okay.
You want to speculate on the September meeting?
Okay, right, that was your question. So my speculation is that they will be disappointed with this update, but that they will approve it nevertheless. I'm going to go with that.
Janet, is there anything just from this group we can be helpful between now and the time you need to get your items published?
Sure. Talk to all of your elected officials and explain the connection between transportation projects and GHG emissions, or the idea of long range planning and aspirational goals. But aside from that, no, thank you. I can't think of anything that you can actually do for us other than, some of our board members just don't seem to understand. I'm not gonna finish that sentence. You all know who your board members are and what the concerns are. So there's not much I can ask for at this point. I appreciate the offer, though. Thank you, Brian.
Any other questions or comments from members? Okay, looks like we have like Suzanne put something in the chat. If you can communicate with your board members about how the CTP fits well with your planning and that you've been part of the process, that would be great. Thank you. Thanks, Suzanne. All right, well, looks like we have Steve. Steve, do you have a thought on this item?
Yeah, one of the ways out of all of this is to point out that the way we reduce VMT is partly by making it more convenient and more safe to bicycle. And that a great deal of that can be done on existing infrastructure. So there is a path to make the reductions that are necessary by following Oakland's example with slow streets and various other approaches, the most important of which may turn out to be making sure that it's the drivers that pay for parking, not the people that are on foot or on bicycles. So the shift to value-priced parking could make a big difference over the next decade in how many people actually decide, well, I can ride my bicycle to the grocery store. I don't need to take my car. So those are the decisions that are going to have to be made city by city and in the county by each of the urbanized areas.
Steve's right. In terms of behavior change, pricing is a big factor. And pricing is not a very popular issue in terms of parking or congestion pricing, road user charges, however they're introduced. So we brought that back to the table in hopes that our board will take that on. There are a lot of bike projects in the plan. Behavior change, though, to get people to use them. We're struggling with coming up with, I think there are a lot of ways that we can encourage that, and we will. And all of the things that we've come up with as from a transportation perspective, even though transportation is 60% of GHG emissions in Sonoma County, maybe 70%. A lot of them have to do with the fact that people can't or won't give up their cars, and that most of the cars out there are gas powered. So until those things change, I think we'll be fighting this fight for quite a while. I'm pleased with the fleet conversion to electric vehicles, but that is not satisfactory answer to a lot of people because there's still a lot of cars on the road. And just one more thing, I'd like to point out that this is just one of our 4 goals. GHG emission is important, and zero emissions by 2050 is a very bold goal, but we also have 3 other goals. So, safety and reliability of the system, well-maintained infrastructure. A lot of people are actually, when we do our public outreach, they're actually interested in those ideas as well. Letting your board members know that we've been talking to you about this monthly for a couple of years now would be helpful. Appreciate it.
Janet. All right. Well, why don't we move on to item number 6, pending development database. I believe it'll be Chris providing an update on preliminary results.
Yeah, so this is just a really brief update. I provided a draft summary of the pending development database update back in June. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up that we'll be taking those results to our board in October. So I've heard, everyone's had a chance to review those and okay those. Still waiting for some final comments from the county on that. But I would encourage you to take a look at the June, those summaries in June, and, I can go ahead and just send that out. So to make it easily accessible to everyone, just to review those before they go to the board.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Any thoughts from the members? Any questions? Okay. And Chris, I believe we have a follow-up just to confirm some of those numbers. So we'll make sure to get that to you.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, well, we're making some pretty good time here. Looks like we have 1 item remaining, standing updates. We have member updates, SCTA board agenda and planning activities, and then a discussion around regional housing needs allocation. And just in the spirit of putting the member updates to the back, just to allow for time, why don't we go down to 5B, SCTA board agenda and planning activities.
Thanks again. Our agenda is not out yet, or I would have included it in this agenda here. The CTP will be on that agenda, and you will receive copies of it along with our planning activities update, which we've not done yet. So that's my report on that.
Thank you, Janet. So why don't we go to item 5C, a discussion on regional housing needs allocation. And I believe this one's more open-ended, so if, I don't think there's an actual lead staff on this one. So I think we can open it up to the floor. Any questions? Looks like Ada.
Yeah, I can say there were 28 appeals. I think 2 from Sonoma, actually 3, 2 from the county, and 1 from was it Windsor? So that's all I know in general. I mean, but that's a context piece. The 2 Sonoma, one of the Sonoma ones was the Cloverdale annexation, which was not included as part of the calculation. So that's probably, it's just a pro forma thing. And then the heavy sigh.
And so we're still, I believe the initial schedule, we're still on track. I believe it's some finality to that before the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, there's a comment period through the end of this month. So there's an opportunity to comment on appeals that are submitted. And because if appeals are granted, there are implications to other, right? So just, I guess if you guys want to think about that. And then the hearings are September, October.
All right. Any final thoughts on this item? Okay. Well, let's go to our final item before public comment. Standing updates from each of the members. If there's anything they'd like to add.
I have to go at 10. This is Kevin in Cloverdale. I'd like to hear what people are doing with the drought situation and improving development. We just passed an urgency ordinance last Wednesday that allows projects to move forward with entitlements, even building permits. But when it comes to water hookups, they have to, kind of go through some additional hoops that are pretty high, including mitigating their water use throughout the community. So demonstrating that they can mitigate their entire use by providing upgrades in the community, paying a fee that we haven't established, not installing landscaping. So I don't know if we are on the upper Russian River, so we're in a more of a dire situation, I think, than maybe some of the other communities. But I don't know if anyone had any thoughts or had taken any actions regarding the drought and development.
I can comment on that. Sorry, I'll use the raise hand button. I like I like that function. I don't use it enough. But I'll say that our water department is working on a shortage policy. So it would go into place not just for this drought, but for future years. So we'd have a policy in place that when we reached a certain stage of shortage, something would kick in where and it's more fee-based. So instead of a moratorium, this would be a fee for projects getting their building permits during the shortage period. And the fee would go towards creating greater offsets in the community. So very similar to what you're talking about, but ours is, it's interesting because it doesn't focus on entitlements, it focuses on the building permits getting finalized or occupancy. So we're kind of working through what that would look like in, for instance, a drought year, but it could be triggered during other events as well. So
Do you have the fee yet, Amy? Or are you still working on that?
no, we're still working on it. So it's on a fast and furious pace, and I can share more once we get to a spot. And I think it's going to go to the Planning Commission for a study session in September.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I'll say for Rohnert Park, this issue came up at a Planning Commission meeting recently, just related to a hotel that was on the agenda. in general, we actually have a lot of water in Rohnert Park because we have wells. I'm learning all about this, by the way, so if I'm not misstating it, but so we've basically switched to using mostly wells for our water supply versus getting it from the greater system, and then also taking Rohnert Park water usage out of the system so that there's more water available for other communities. So our water table is actually super high because we haven't been using our wells for the past as much as for the past decade or so. So we actually have quite a bit of water actually in the ground still.
But Jeff, it's not Russian River influence water. I'm learning.
Correct.
A lot.
Exactly. Yes, correct. We are definitely in a different situation than you are up there, Kevin. But we, I don't want to say we're drowning in water, but we don't have a water supply problem. But we are requiring conservation kind of for the short-term impacts. We're asking water customers to conserve and all that type of thing, and not water lawns and try to use as little water as possible just to deal with the short-term problem. But so I don't know if philosophically I have an issue with limiting building permits because it seems like we're punishing long-term. We're using a long-term solution for a short-term problem, and that just feeds into the NIMBYs that want to kill projects. But anyway, that's just me philosophizing. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Jeff. Scott, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to point out that obviously we're similarly situated to Cloverdale here in Healdsburg, and the council has been having a lot of discussion around this issue. The community has been really successful in conservation, close to 50%. We've required that all outdoor irrigation cease, and people have done that really well. We've actually been using our recycled water as an offset for them. It's actually being trucked around to, people can get water tanks on their property and then hand water using the recycled water. And I think it's now close to 800 properties that are taking advantage of that. So people are taking it seriously, and it seems to be having a lot of success in that regard, but it doesn't stop the overall discussion about, moratoriums. Why are we allowing, projects to move forward at this time? We're trying to keep the big picture in mind, and that this is hopefully a short-term problem, and that development by and large is a long-term game. And, the projects that are going through entitlements now probably won't, be built for 2 to 3 years potentially. So we've got a big workshop coming up next Monday night. We're trying to frame this discussion around the urban water management plan, which has happened to be going to the council. So we're kind of using that to try and keep it at the bigger picture level. For projects that have been entitled and that are under construction, they're not allowed to plant or install any of the landscaping, and we're deferring those conditions of approval that are related to that down the road. So that's kind of where we're at. But there's our planning commission agendas have been pretty light lately. In fact, we haven't had any. It'll be interesting as projects start coming forward to the planning commission if we start to see those citizens that are concerned about future projects starting to show up to protest against those projects. So that's kind of where we're at here in Healdsburg.
Thanks, Scott. Hey, Carrie.
Yeah, so Sebastopol isn't Russian River, but I tend to take the long view on all this kind of stuff. So our council has a 25% mandatory and has reduction. One of the things that includes is prohibiting filling or refilling of pools. So like I just had a design review project come forward, and we recommended the spa be removed. And I think, one of the concerns is we don't actually have a moratorium on those types of things. Our council is going to be discussing that next Tuesday, mostly because one of our council members got an email from a new neighbor saying they were going to put in a pool. When she told them they couldn't fill it, they said they'd truck in water from Santa Rosa, which really does not seem like the spirit of it. So Santa Rosa, please, please, please don't allow that. It would help us out as well. But that council member did express an interest in those types of things. Because we don't have, the Russian River issues, we haven't We haven't gone to sort of the actual development side of things and restrictions there, but certainly we would, especially if people wanted to install landscape at a later time. And yes, I just saw the comment. Yes, we're supposed to have a La Nina winter, which means we may have the exact same winter we had last year. And so long range, is that an appropriate development? My own feeling is, water is precious. We have a community pool. Private pools maybe aren't the best use of that resource in California.
Yeah, Kevin, just know we have not limited development or building permits. We're asking for 20% voluntary reduction, and we've been hitting it, but primarily by increasing our pumping to offset our demand on the Russian River. And then the only other thing I would suggest, if you're looking for options, I know some of the Napa County jurisdictions have some pretty good offset programs that have been in place for a number of years. And St. Helena specifically, I was tasked with implementing that when I was over there. And there's a lot to it as far as, in order to get a new connection, you have to offset certain amounts and basically buy low flow fixtures for other folks in the community to offset your use. And it's been around and worked for a couple decades, I think.
Thanks, Noah. Yeah, our public works director recently went there, so I'll ask him. Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I think we're in a little more dire than the rest of you guys, only because of our position on the north stretch of the Russian River. But I appreciate all your comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. So a lot of good discussion and policies around water conservation. Are there any, well, actually just given there's 5 minutes, I believe some we're going to leave at 10. So those who will leave in a few minutes, any updates they'd like to provide to the group?
So I have to leave in 5 minutes. So I'll just very quickly say we're super busy with processing numerous affordable housing projects, which is very exciting for Windsor because we are currently at the bottom of the pack as far as our housing development and in particular our affordable housing. So we're very excited about the projects that are currently underway, but it's keeping all of us extremely busy. We also are in the process of updating our zoning ordinance and inclusionary housing ordinance. The zoning ordinance update is housing focused. That's what we're using our LEAP funds for. We're also getting closer to having a draft short-term vacation rental ordinance ready, and we're going to be taking that to the community for input here pretty soon. And then we just launched our housing and safety element update. So that kind of very short. That's what's happening in Windsor. So I'm going to have to jump off here in just a second, but that's about it.
Thanks, Jessica. Amy.
Yeah, instead of an update, I wanted to ask a question about how everyone's dealing with this MICO thing, the Micro Enterprise Home Kitchen Operations, if you guys have dealt with this yet. I love the acronym, but we're just trying to grapple with what to do, either to opt out or opt in, and if anyone's had to grapple with potentially a pilot program. I'm not sure what that looks like.
Jessica, why don't you go first?
Yeah, quickly from Windsor. I'm pretty sure that we've already sent a letter to the county with our position, which is not in support currently for it. It's a great idea, but I think there's a lot of concern about the loss of local control and having potential commercial type kitchens in residential areas and folks coming into these areas, traffic impacts to neighborhoods, ADA issues of, and we're getting hounded on ADA problems right now. I don't know if anybody else is, but anyway, so we have again, I think it's an interesting idea, but I think that it needs more work. So at this point, Windsor is not in support.
Yeah, and I'll just say ditto for Sebastopol. I sent a letter on Monday. to that effect, outlining those, as well as the downtown vacancies and other commercial vacancies that we have. And also, we allow pop-ups, and we've had restaurants with 2 restaurants in one space as a way of, just being flexible as a city, but having that local control. And I do know from David's story that Sonoma Council discussed it on Monday night as well, and unanimously asked to opt out because of all those same reasons.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background on it's still going to the board as part of the September 14th board. It'll be a workshop essentially, just to provide, so environmental health will be there, facilitating, outlining some of the challenges, and then it looks like we're also receiving the feedback from the councils based on the CAO letter that went out in July.
Brian, do you know who is the staff person? Is that Christina Susko from Environmental Health?
Correct.
Okay, I have a calendar, but I haven't gotten a call back, so just to discuss those issues.
Yeah, what I've learned so far is that, I mean, I agree with all your points, because anything that we don't have local control over, I'm generally not in support of, but it sounds like a lot of these are already happening. And this is just a recognition of those through the environmental health lens. So I'm trying to find that balance of like, how much is actually happening and how big of a problem is it to be able to opt in and give up that much control.
Yeah, and the problem seems to be is that like we have home occupation regulations, but they wouldn't apply. And so there'd be, and I can't imagine that the county is going to come out and enforce when there's a noise complaint or a parking complaint in any of our neighborhoods.
Yep. Thanks.
No offense, Brian, to the county. I can't see the capacity.
Okay, well, so more to come. I don't believe there's a time certain yet or a posting, but as more information comes out and the agenda gets set, there'll be a board summary and some more information. All right, any other, looks like we're a minute after the 10 o'clock. I think there were maybe a couple more people that might need to hop off here. Do they have any updates that they'd like to provide? Okay. Any general member updates, Carrie? I just saw you go unmute, so.
Oh, sorry. I was actually going to ask Ada a question. If there was any update on the arena appeal process that we're sharing at this point.
Yeah, I think just the timeline. I'm not going to go into the deeds of all the different problems, I guess, but there would be something I'd want to ask the group if separate from RHNA. As you know, there's the REAP funding. You guys have a planning collaborative, but there are other kind of regional initiatives and things that we're also pushing in terms of working groups. I think some of you heard, if you didn't hear, there's kind of, we'll probably be putting a call out for high opportunity communities and facilitate a couple meetings with HCD because people seem to have some questions about that. Just challenges of AFFH being a high opportunity community, not having access, not having just all of the challenges around what makes sense. We have a missing middle workshop, which I think some of you have signed, working group, some of you have signed on to. Malls and office parks, Amy, we've talked to you in terms of transforming regional office malls or office parks and malls. I'm working on something a little more smaller scale, which is strip malls and shopping centers. So looking at if we could help develop some kind of feasibility analysis and kind of market analysis around different places where it makes sense, where those might be able to be transformed into mixed use sites, or if they should be kind of intensified as commercial. But one that I'm working on is also farm worker housing. And it's Sonoma, Napa have 70% of the farm workers in the region, in the 9 counties. So it really is. So if any of you are interested and there are things that we can do specifically to support you, we're scoping that out. We'll be doing a little focus group in September. So if you're interested, let me know. And if you know other folks in other parts, so we'll be doing a stakeholder focus group, really probably more like industry side. We'll be talking to some consultants and stuff. And I know, Carrie, really specifically from your speaking, that the field has changed in terms of farm workers are now more permanent workers. We're looking at the data. And so those housing solutions may look a little different too. And so when farm worker housing shows up in town, like, how does that work? What are the financing mechanisms? Are there legislative things that we need to be involved in terms of changing some of that stuff? So saw your note, Amy. If anybody else, shoot me a note and let me know. Right now we're scoping out two small meetings just to see what you need and what's useful. It may not be about your housing element, because as I read through housing elements, it seems like that's a very token piece in terms of farm workers of all that you have to address. It may be more on the implementation side. So we're just looking at what can we do that would be useful, and using some of that REAP money to support your work in that particular area.
Thanks, Ada. Looks like there's a couple members that dropped their interest in the chat, but encourage the rest of the group, if there is interest, to reach out directly to Ada. All right, thanks, Ada.
Hey,
I believe...
sorry, this is Rafael with the City of Cloverdale. I was going to type, but I don't type as quick as I talk, I guess. But I was going to say, yeah, Cloverdale probably would like to be added in that group as well.
Great.
We've already had one built, like 4 or 5 years ago, and we've got the Bumgarner project had like 59 farm worker units. That's hopefully going to be built in the next couple of years, and then we've got another project that is in the application phase now. And we've been getting some local pushback for whatever reason. I think they're hiding behind water, but there might be other reasons why they might be against projects like that. So anyway, yeah, city supports it, but I think we should be involved in that conversation too, because we seem to be getting those applications. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Raphael.
All right, are there any, I see a few members from SCTA, any updates or topics they'd like to offer up for this roundtable?
Thanks, Brian. I think we're covered.
Great.
Yeah, I can give a quick jurisdictional update because I have a question. But anyway, we are really busy with development projects, but we're also trying to get our general plan draft together. We're trying to create a public draft and start our EIR process. And the topic of the month is climate change. We're going to have a study session, 2 study sessions with the Planning Commission, the City Council in about a month. And one key question that we keep, and we also have authorization to actually hire a climate change person. And so one thing we're really debating on, which if anybody from this group can, they can just contact me offline, but we're trying to decide whether we want more of an operational person, which would kind of help us with public facilities on the climate change side. Are they going to help us with an all electric vehicle fleet, electrifying our city buildings, maybe grant writing, or would we be better off hiring kind of a planner type to interface with with RCPA in this group, and also write grants and ordinances and those types of things. So anyway, so that's just a question I'm just throwing out there to the group, if anybody has any insights, if they've dealt with this quandary in the past. Unfortunately, we can't hire 2 people. So, and that's all I got for my update for today.
Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff, I don't think I have a solution for you necessarily, but Sebastopol, along with RCPA, did a joint application to for a Civic Spark Fellow to work on work with our. We have a climate action committee that started last year. They're going to be working. So we did receive a fellow, and they're starting in September. And so that's basically 11 months of a sort of 3/4 time FTE for It's a good deal for the city. It's $30,000 for that. And Tanya's not here, so I'm not going to volunteer her to host any additional fellows. And actually this year is closed. I believe the deadlines have all passed for it. But that might be something to look at in the future. They will be developing a climate action framework based on the RCPA mobilization strategy. So hoping to move that forward.
Yeah, no, that's useful. So 1 this year, maybe 2 next year. There you go.
So Jeff, I would recommend you talk to Tanya Nareth here. She could help you out.
Okay.
All right. Any final updates from members? All right. Well, let's move on to item number 7 for public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to provide any comment? Steve, is that you waving your hand?
Yeah, I'm just saying thank you for all of your work. I had my comments earlier.
Thanks, Steve. All right. Well, if that is the total of the public comment, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All right, so ordered. All righty. Well, thanks everyone for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, everybody.